few questions for
Okay.
you today. What does liberation-based healing mean to you?
Liberation-based healing. I see liberation-based healing as an expression of a broader, I would say, movement, an emerging movement within the mental health professions that is seeking to intentionally promote both individual healing and social transformation. I say intentionally because for years clinicians have been here and there, university clinics and community organizations have been working on this. They have been paying attention to the social conditions that are toxic to people's lives, as well as the individual distress. But as a field of mental health, we have not made that a central part of what we do, an intentional component of our work. So this is happening now in different places. It's bubbling up in different places, and I think the liberation-based healing approaches are an important part of that.
Yes. How do you strive to incorporate this social justice into your work?
Okay. In many ways it's relatively easy because for me, social justice is a pragmatic concern. You know, we live in a world that is with a lot of inequities that are in part because of the great communication systems that we have and the availability of information. It's become a lot more difficult to hide those inequities. So we know a lot more about how things are not set up fairly for many individuals and about the consequences that those have for individuals, for relationships, and for communities. And we also know from research and lived experiences that those inequities are at the core of much of the distress that people suffer, and even at the core of many of the economic difficulties that we're having. So I think when I like to tell people that for me, social justice is not just simply a moral commitment or an issue, even though I am very much in favor of equitable societies, but it is really a pragmatic consideration. What we have, the disparities in distribution of resources and access and opportunities for people to move on and support their lives and live lives that are worth living, have serious consequences and are affecting us all of us. So that's, for me, it's relatively easy to keep it as part of my life because I'm kind of like, I wake up every morning and I feel like I'm the movement for that day, you know. So I'm always looking for ways in which, how can we link those resources that you have, that you bring into this conversation, to these other resources that somebody else has, and how can they combine, kind of like lead to better outcomes for the populations that we're working or concerned about. So I'm always in that business of linking and creating networks that maximize people's resources, even if they don't know that that's what they're doing. You don't need to be a committed for social justice. If you're dealing with me, I'm, for the most part, trying to link whatever you have to bring to the table and bring it to, you know, and tie it in, match it in with other talent, resources, and aspirations that are similar to yours for the benefit of others.
Okay, and I know that you spoke on the panel about your students, about how they are very good at identifying problems, but not so much treating the problem. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on that.
Well, yeah, the point that I was trying to make there is that we, in our ways of evaluating the development of competencies for young clinicians, and we reward their ability to identify deficits, their ability to kind of like identify needs that the clients have. It rewards, in a sense, somewhat of a reactive stance on their part. We're waiting there for people to come in and then respond to those problems. and I think it's and it rewards also a fuller understanding of your affected state. You know, we pay a lot of attention about how, are you depressed, are you happy, are you are there fluctuations in moods, etc. And all those things are, I'm not saying that they're irrelevant, they are relevant, but they are insufficient to really deal with a lot of the problems that people bring into the room. And I think one of the exciting developments, I think, for me, for the movement, and I'm not talking about one form of therapy, but I think there's an array of interventions developing now out there that are aiming to do both attend to individual needs and deficits, and help remedy those, and at the same time, in an intentional manner, attend to the social and relational conditions that are toxic for people and that are really very much kind of like interfering with the ability for them to live lives that are worth living. In that context is that I mentioned the issue of rights. And that, to me, to repeat what I said there, is important because a lot of what we confuse and needs that people have are violations of their rights. And so when you are inarticulate about it as an individual, you're going to internalize it. You don't feel good. You feel really demoralized. You feel confused. You feel somewhat mistreated sometimes, and with misdirected anger. You just feel like you want to explode. You feel like, and all those, we're very good at identifying all those signs, but we don't have a language to help you often identify, okay, what might this be related to these other conditions. And I think when we, as students, begin to understand more about and think about the issue of both needs and rights, and how they go hand in hand with each other, they become very able to discern what are needs that have to do with specific deficits that we need, skill development, things that we need to help these individuals, and what are other things that have to do with a living environment that is really unsafe, that is really unsupportive and not affirming of this person's desires, wishes, and ambitions in life, and that is by definition demoralizing. So when people say depressed, when a student comes to me and says, "Oh, the client is depressed," I'm thinking, I invite them to think about how are they demoralized, because now the conversation is different. Now it's not, depression seems like it exists somewhere in a gene, and it's kind of like, to be demoralized, it speaks about really about the social domain, about aspirations that are not realized, about lack of clarity of which direction should you go and who's there to support you. And I think it is very important for clinicians to develop the ability to do that too. Now, that's not the only thing that they need to do. We also need to pay attention to the needs. So I think the lack of balance is what I am against it in a sense, and I think and the need to have a greater clarity about these issues.